Breaking news from around your world on this Thursday, January 31st, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. The European Parliament recognized Venezuela's self-declared interim president, Juan Guaido, as de facto head of state on Thursday, heightening international pressure on the OPEC members' socialist president, Nicolas Maduro. In a statement with the non-binding vote, the Parliament urged the bloc's 28 governments to follow suit and consider Guaido the only legitimate interim president until there were new, free, transparent, and credible presidential elections. Meanwhile, Venezuela's embattled president warned that if the U.S. intervenes to push him out of power, it will have a Vietnam worse than they can imagine. President Donald Trump also recognized Guaido as the South American nation's legitimate leader. Maduro has accused the U.S. of trying to oust him in a coup. There was a burst of speculation that Trump is considering sending troops to Venezuela this week after his national security advisor, John Bolton, was seen holding a notepad with a line reading, 5,000 troops to Colombia. Guaido said Wednesday in an op-ed piece that the opposition had held secret meetings with members of Venezuela's military, whose support, he said, would be critical in a transition to a new government. President Trump lashed out at his own intelligence chiefs after they contradicted some of his assertions on rivals such as North Korea and Iran. Trump defended his own optimistic take on North Korea's promise to denuclearize, countering warnings in the annual worldwide threat assessment that North Korea does not intend to give up all of its nuclear weapons. He also called intelligence officials naive for suggesting that Iran was not actively working toward developing its own nukes. Perhaps intelligence should go back to school, Trump tweeted. Democrats called Trump's comments irresponsible. If you're going to ignore that information, then you're going to make poor decisions, said Representative Adam Schiff of California, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He said it means the country is fundamentally less safe. The United States will stop complying with a landmark nuclear pact with Russia as soon as this weekend, after last-ditch talks with Moscow to save it fell flat. Washington has long accused Russia of flouting the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or INF, alleging that a new Russian missile, called the SSC-8 by NATO, violates the pact, which bans either side from stationing short and intermediate range land-based missiles in Europe. Russia denies that, saying the missile's range puts it outside the treaty, and has accused the United States of inventing a false pretext to exit a treaty Washington wants to leave anyway, so as to develop new missiles. It also rejected a U.S. demand to destroy the new missile. U.S. Under-Secretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, Andrea Thompson, on Thursday, told Reuters since the two countries had failed to bridge their differences, she expected Washington to now stop complying with the treaty as soon as this weekend. A move she said would allow the U.S. military to immediately begin developing its own longer-range missiles if it chooses to do so, raising the prospect they could be deployed in Europe. A key member of Prime Minister Theresa May's government acknowledged Thursday that Britain's exit from the European Union may have to be delayed if negotiations on a divorce deal drag on. Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt told the BBC a delay may be necessary to pass legislation to implement Brexit. His comments come as the influential think tank, the Institute for Government, warned the government was not ready should a no-Brexit deal come to pass. The think tank predicted that the government would be unable to avoid major negative impacts. Britain's car makers issued a stark assessment Thursday about Brexit's impact on the industry, warning that 2/3 of the country's global trade is at risk if the UK leaves the European Union without an agreement on the future. Investment in the industry fell 46% last year, and new car production dropped 9.1% to just a little more than 1.5 million vehicles in 2018, in part because of concerns over Brexit. The Society of Motor Manufacturing's chief executive, Mike Hawes, described the threat of a no deal as catastrophic. Britain's parliament has refused to rule out a no-deal Brexit, voting this week instead to give Prime Minister May more time to try and iron out a compromise with the EU. Germany, France, and Britain have set up a European mechanism to facilitate trade with Iran so it can continue to benefit from its 2015 agreement to curb its nuclear program despite U.S. sanctions. That's according to Reuters on Thursday, citing two diplomats. The European Union has spent months preparing the system to provide a clearinghouse that allows transfers in currency other than dollars, although technical issues could prevent the system from becoming operational for several more months. Europe has been trying to encourage Iran to continue honoring the nuclear deal since President Trump withdrew the U.S. from it last year. The system will not fully revive trade. Its focus will be on food, medicine, and humanitarian transactions, not oil-related ones targeted by the U.S. Italy has fallen back into recession, intensifying concerns about the 19-country Eurozone economy and a possible flare-up in the debt market jitters that haunted the bloc in recent years. The Italian economy, the third largest in the Eurozone, is in a technical recession, defined as 2 straight quarters of economic contraction, just 4 years after its last one. Italy's recession is one reason why the wider Eurozone slowed in 2018, along with uncertainties related to Brexit, the China-U.S. trade spat, and new vehicle emission standards. Though the Eurozone is performing better than in the dark days of the debt crisis, which threatened to break up the euro currency, unemployment in the Eurozone is about 8%. The Italian government, elected against the backdrop of economic disappointment after years, even decades of stagnant growth, wants to ramp up spending to get the economy going. It wants to provide more Social Security payments and to roll back a pension reform. The plan means Italy would not reduce its debt load, which, at over 130%, is the highest in Europe after Greece. About 5,500 pounds of meat from sick cows that were slaughtered illegally in Poland was exported to 10 other European Union countries. Poland's top state veterinary official said Thursday the meat was also distributed to 20 selling points in Poland, but has since been recalled. The announcement follows the recent airing of an undercover report by the private broadcaster TVN that documented sick cows being slaughtered in violation of the law in northeastern Poland. That meat ended up in Finland, Hungary, Estonia, Romania, Sweden, France, Spain, Lithuania, Portugal, and Slovakia. Sweden's National Food Agency said small quantities of the meat had been sold to 4 companies in Sweden and called it a serious violation of food law and totally unacceptable. The agency said authorities in EU countries to which the meat was exported were alerted. Officials in Finland said some 250 kilograms of Polish meat suspected to be from sick cows ended up in that country. Food safety officials were investigating whether any of that meat had been sold in local stores. The Polish Veterinary Inspectorate stripped the slaughterhouse of permission to operate earlier this week. Apple supplier Foxconn said that it's abandoning a plan to build a major new factory in Wisconsin, a project President Trump had touted as a massive source of new jobs, and said it will instead build a research and development center. The Taiwanese tech giant said that it would still hire 13,000 people, but that they would be engineers and researchers instead of factory workers. In a statement, Foxconn said, "The global market environment that existed when the project was first announced has changed." Wisconsin had agreed to give the company $3 billion in state tax credits and breaks, although critics complained that the state would make no money on it for 25 years. Under the contract, Wisconsin can withhold some of the tax breaks if Foxconn changes the deal. Facebook is shutting down an iOS app that gave the company access to users' private data in exchange for gift cards. According to a TechCrunch report, the social media giant, for the past 3 years, has been paying up to $20 a month to people between the ages of 13 and 35 who downloaded a VPN on their phone. The report said users who agreed to do so were giving Facebook nearly limitless access to their devices and data, including their private messages, emails, and web activity. Just hours after the report was published, Facebook said it would discontinue the iOS app And Apple banned the company from using a program intended for businesses that it says Facebook misused. SpaceX's giant Falcon Heavy rocket could take to the skies 5 weeks from now if everything goes according to plan. The California-based company is targeting March 7th for the Falcon Heavy's second ever launch, Ars Technica reported, citing permit applications that SpaceX filed this week with the federal government. The rocket will carry the 6.6-ton Arabsat 6A communications satellite for Saudi Arabia, a far more conventional payload than its first flight in February 2018. On that one, SpaceX sent Elon Musk's red Tesla Roadster and its mannequin driver, dubbed Starman, into orbit around the sun. Like SpaceX's workhorse Falcon 9 rocket, the Falcon Heavy is a two-stage rocket with a reusable first stage. The Falcon Heavy's first stage consists of 3 Falcon 9 first stages, a modified central core, and 2 side boosters. The launch will take place from the historic Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, which also served as the jumping-off point for Apollo moon missions 50 years ago, as well as space shuttle flights. And that's your update for this Thursday, January 31st, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Thanks so much for supporting this podcast and for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.